Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It's me, the Yorkshireman Reacts, and tonight I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. And this is something that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time, but it kind of got forgotten about because around the time that I was arranging to do this, a different sort of content started popping up and becoming popular, and other things started popping up as well in terms of content. And honestly, I just forgot about it. But you know, well, actually, no, I didn't really forget about it, but it's just, every time another thing came to my head thinking, maybe I'll do this today, or maybe I'll do that, this just kept going further back in terms of the pecking order of priorities. Which it shouldn't really have done, because what I'm going to be reacting to is a video from my favourite football channel on YouTube, which is Football Iconic. It's a brilliant channel. The guy behind this channel, the videos he makes, they are absolutely incredible. They are like documentary standard videos, like the sort of thing you'd expect to see in a full-on blockbuster football documentary, like the Wayne Rooney documentary from years ago, or the Class of '92 documentary, things like that. The standard of his videos are fantastic. And about a year ago, he released a video about Blackburn Rovers. Well, the title of the video is Blackburn Rovers, the Premier League champions that disappeared. And this is one particular football story that I've always been curious about, but never actually taken the time to go into and learn about. I obviously, as a football fan, I know that there was a Blackburn Rovers team that won the Premier League title with Alan Shearer and is it Chris Sutton up front? Something Sutton. I know that the other striker was called Sutton. I know that for a fact. Yeah, they won the Premier League, and it was out of nowhere, because even though it was during the early stages of the Premier League, even around that time, the clubs that won the First Division were always either Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, and that was about it. Nobody else won the league in the 90s, apart from Man United, or Arsenal, and Blackburn. That was, I think they are the only three clubs that won the First Division. Oh no, Leeds United won the final season of the First Division before it became the Premier League. And then, when it became the Premier League, the only clubs that won it were Man United and Arsenal, right? And Blackburn. So, yeah, it's a story that I've always been curious about and wanted to learn how they did it and how it came about. And in this guy's videos, I know that I'm going to get that information, because the videos of his that I've watched, I mean, this guy, never mind going deep, this guy goes beyond deep. He goes so far underground that you wouldn't even have a radio signal. It is amazing, the information that he puts into his videos and how he puts them together, the format of the videos. They are absolutely incredible. And a while ago, I actually asked this guy for permission for me to use his video in a reaction video, when I commented on a video that he posted regarding Ruben Amorim called It's Time to Go. And he posted this on the 28th of September 2025. Amorim was sacked a few months after that, but still, it's funny that he posted that and then not long after that he was gone. But, yeah, honestly, as a neutral, I just said Amorim was doing a good job. He had them in the Champions League place. I know Michael Carrick is doing an absolute madness right now, but I just said that Amorim was doing the job that they brought him in to do. Last season, they nearly got relegated with the squad that he inherited, and then in the summer, he got rid of the crap, brought in a few players that he deemed what was needed for his system, and Man United were in the top 5 when they sacked him. Yeah, he had a few bad results, but still. Anyway, I got permission from him to use his video. I left a comment on this video asking him if I could react to the video, and he said, not a problem with me, mate. So, yeah, if there's anybody from YouTube watching that's even thinking of putting a content ID on this video, don't even go there, because I have permission from the original creator of this video that I'm about to react to, that I have got permission. I've got his permission to use the video, and I'm so excited to watch this, because I've been waiting to watch this for a very long time. You know, it was I asked him if I could do this 4 months ago, so I've been waiting 4 months to react to this video. Over 4 months. I've been waiting since the end of last summer, basically, because I spotted it, and then I thought I might watch it, I might not. And then I thought, why don't I react to it? It might be an interesting type of different sort of content for the channel. But then I thought, it's a big channel. If I just react to it without asking him, am I going to get a content ID claim, etc., etc.? So I asked him, he said yes, and then I didn't do anything about it. But here I am doing something about it. So, this is Blackburn Rovers, the Premier League champions that disappeared. And that's true. Blackburn Rovers did disappear because now they're a struggling side in the Championship. They won last week, which is good. It pulled them out of the relegation zone. I've been keeping an eye on Blackburn this season, and they won their last game, which pulled them out of the relegation zone, which I was very happy to see. But yeah, I always remember Blackburn. When I first started getting into football as a kid, Blackburn Rovers, for some reason, were just one of the clubs that were always in and around the football that I was paying attention to. And they always had players that I knew, like Morten Gams Pedersen, players like that, you know. It was just a club that I couldn't help but notice. And whenever Man United played them, and yeah, it was just a club. Well, I love the kit, you know, the blue and white kit that they used to play in. They were so noticeable. I've never been to Blackburn. I've never been to watch them play or watch my team that I support play against them, because we've never played against them whilst I've been watching them. But I always remember, if I was ever going somewhere like Manchester or over that way, that we would always see the sign for their stadium on the motorway. It's a sign that I've passed about 10 times in my life, you know? But then you see the sign and you're looking over and you can't see the stadium anywhere from the motorway. So I don't know where Ewood Park is, but it must be like buried within a valley, because it's impossible to see it from the motorway. But anyway, let's get into this, because I've been waiting for this a long time. Massive shout out to the dude who runs the Football Iconic channel. It is, in my opinion, the best channel that makes this type of content, this format of football information type / documentary type video. It's a brilliant format, and I hope this is going to be the first of many reactions to his fantastic content. And make sure that you go over to his channel if you're a football fan, subscribe to his channel, support him, because you won't find better videos than this in this genre of football factual based content. I'm telling you now. Forget the American channels with the shitty AI generated voices. This guy puts every single second of these videos together himself, and he voices these videos himself as well. He does every bit himself. He doesn't rely on AI for anything. This guy does all the work, and that's why I prefer his channel over the others that just get a load of copyrighted AI images and then use an AI voiceover and put it through an AI video maker, slap it together, and then there you go. There's your football documentary. Thank you for 500,000 views. No, I'm not supporting channels like that. I support people who do the work, and this guy does the work. So support him, because he deserves it more than them. Let's go. Oh, hang on.
I never get my money back. I'm only interested in putting Rovers.
Hang on a minute. I'm going to turn the subtitles off, because they shouldn't be on. I can hear what this guy's saying.
I never get my money back. I'm only interested in putting Rovers where they should be. I mean, they're one of the founder members, and we want them right back on top.
Over 50 teams have participated in the Premier League since its inception, yet only 7 have lifted the coveted trophy. These days, it's hard to imagine that anyone other than a...
It's crazy that, isn't it? Over 50 teams have participated in the Premier League, but only 7 teams have won it. It's crazy.
Have lifted the coveted trophy in the Premier League since its inception, yet only 7 have lifted the coveted trophy. These days, it's hard to...
Who can name all the clubs that have won the Premier League title? Comment below. Leave your comments now, before I actually give you the answer. I'll pause the video to make your comments if you know the answer, or if you're just going to guess it out loud. Right, now you finish pausing. Man United, I'll go in alphabetical order. Blackburn, Arsenal, Blackburn, Leicester, Chelsea, Leicester, Liverpool, Man United, Man City. That's all. Wait, is that 7? Yeah. Arsenal, Blackburn, Chelsea, Leicester, Liverpool, Man United, Man City. 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Imagine that anyone other than a pool of 3, maybe 4 clubs will win it in the foreseeable future. But that wasn't the case right at the inception of the league. Back then, it was a kind of free-for-all. Teams were finding their footing in the midst of a wave of TV and commercial upticks. Sir Alex Ferguson seemed to be the only one that had the game all figured out. The likes of Aston Villa, Leeds, Newcastle, Queen's Park Rangers, and more all had their time at the pinnacle of the table. But almost none of them could keep the consistency running season by season. Man City were fighting...
Do you know, speaking of that, one of the most recent videos that this channel has uploaded is one about Kevin Keegan's Newcastle in the early days of the Premier League. I might react to that one as well.
For their lives in the relegation zone more often than not.
Look at the form of Manchester City in the first 10 years of the Premier League. 9th, 16th, 17th, 18th relegated. Then they finished 14th in the First Division. Then they got relegated from the First Division. So they ended up in the same league that my team, Bradford City, is in. And then they were promoted straight back into the First Division after their first season in the second. And then they got promoted again from the First Division back into the Premier League, relegated straight away again. It's just crazy when you look at that record, because it's Manchester City. You look at that and you wouldn't think, if you covered up the badge, you wouldn't think that that was the league form of Manchester City. If you showed that to somebody who was like 15 years old, that knows nothing about football history beyond 2010, they just would not think that that was Man City's record from 93 to 2003. It's crazy, isn't it? Where clubs can be versus where clubs were versus where they can be in a few years' time. It's like Bournemouth. You know, Bournemouth were in a similar position to where my club is right now, or in an even worse position 20 years ago. They were in the conference or fumbling around in League Two, and now they're Premier League mainstays. It's incredible what Bournemouth have done over the last 10 years. I love Bournemouth. They're one of my neutral clubs. You know, clubs like that you like neutrally not support but always wish the best for. I've got a few clubs like that. Nottingham Forest being one, obviously, because of the Brian Clough thing. I love Brian Clough. He's my favourite English manager of all time. Yeah, Bournemouth, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, West Ham. I feel sorry for West Ham fans because of the stadium. I hate what happened to their old stadium, the way the fans had no say in it whatsoever, and they were dragged into that soulless fishbowl of a stadium where there's no atmosphere at all. It's awful. But yeah, it's just crazy when you look at that. And then they became only the second English club in history to win a treble. Like 20 years later. It's just crazy.
It was a completely different period in time. But there was one club that I've yet to mention amongst all of these that actually has something to show for this wild, wild west period of time that isn't just folklore. A team that actually managed to get their hands on the trophy. Yet, somehow, this same team faded away into obscurity almost immediately. This team is Blackburn Rovers. A curious case, a team that many will tell you bought their success, yet isn't remembered in the same way that Chelsea and Man City are. A team that housed the greatest striker in English football history at the peak of his powers, an owner that had a vision and actually made it happen, and the only town club to have won a Premier League title. Today, we recount the story of Blackburn Rovers, the Premier League champions that...
Kenny Dalglish was the manager that took them to the Premier League, right? I know that much about it, that Dalglish was the manager of Blackburn when they won the Premier League. That's about as much as I know. And that Shearer was playing for them. And he was crazy. It was like not his first, but one of his best seasons.
Disrupted the status quo only to never be seen again. Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't, or, don't. From the outside looking in, the Lancashire Town Club aren't exactly what we would associate with Premier League champions. They finished the 23-24 football season only 3 points above relegation in the Championship.
And it's looking very much the same this season, that they're going to finish just a few points off relegation, or even get relegated if they're not careful. They did get relegated. They were in League One not long ago. They were relegated. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they got relegated to League One a few years ago. Sure they did. Yeah, they did.
If you were to speak to anyone that started watching the Premier League recently, they may find it hard to believe that a team that hasn't even been in the league for over a decade was once the most feared team in the country. Not just feared for what they did on the pitch, but for the threat they posed to the status quo. However, I'm getting ahead of myself. To really understand where this club came from and how they managed to shock the world in the way that they did, we have to go back to the 19th century.
The 19th
Blackburn
century.
Rovers are a fascinating and storied football club. One might even consider them as one of the first giants in the game of English football, as they were successful almost immediately upon formation.
This is what I love about this guy's videos. When he's doing this sort of story, he does go back to the early beginnings of clubs that were successful early on or had early success. So if he did like a Preston North End video, he would go back to their early days when they were one of the most successful clubs in the world, which they were. But I think Preston were the first club to... They were the first club to do something, weren't they? What was it? Was it the first club to win a double or something? Or the first club to win the First Division twice in a row or something? But I'm pretty sure they did something significant. I can't remember which one it is, but they were a huge club in the 19th century. They were one of the best clubs. Well, they were the best team in England at one point in that century. Yeah. And Burnley as well. When they first started, they were a good team as well. And they won the league shortly after World War I a couple of times. The First Division a few times after World War I think. I'm probably getting years mixed up and getting years wrong. But yeah, clubs like Burnley, Preston North End, Coventry, or Wolves, teams like that were successful early on. Yeah, I love how he does this and goes back to the beginning.
Game of English football, as they were successful almost immediately upon formation. Formed in 1875, Blackburn Rovers, like several business endeavors, started off as the vision of two mates, John Lewis and Arthur Constantine. This right here is John Lewis. As expected, his mustache is commendable. The two called a town meeting where the agenda was the formation of a club that played football under association rules. And on the 18th of December 1875, the first official Blackburn Rovers matchup was played. They faced some competition at the time for the crown of Team of the Town, as there were over a dozen other clubs in existence in Blackburn, one of which was the now long defunct club
There was a dozen football clubs in existence in Blackburn alone in 1875. A dozen football clubs. That's mental. So if there was that many around in a small Lancashire town like Blackburn, then there must have been like 50 in London. I mean, how many clubs is there from London now? Just in the top 4 leagues, there's about... I can think of 5 off the top of my head, and that's just the Premier League. That's crazy.
Blackburn Olympic FC. I mentioned them because this team may very well be one of the most significant northern teams in all of England, maybe one of the most significant teams across the country. Founded 3 years after Rovers in 1878, Olympic were very much a working man's club with all of...
Same year as Man United. Same year Man United were founded, but not as Man United.
In 1878, Olympic were very much a working man's club, with all of its players being manual labourers or factory workers. Most of the quote-unquote true footballing talent lay in the south of England at the time. Something to understand is that in the early days, football wasn't really a working man's sport. It was for the upper class. And at the time, in the 1800s at least, football was entirely amateur. About all the southern teams consisted of upper class players from prestigious schools and backgrounds, so they had the necessary training, which may explain why the FA Cup went south every year.
Yeah, it's quite ironic that, isn't it? That in the early beginnings of football, it was for the upper class and the rich. And then it became the sport of the working class. But nowadays, footballers become the upper class, the rich, because they get paid ridiculous amounts of money to play the game. So it's kind of reverted back to that. And it's heading that way for a lot of fans as well. I mean, to support a Premier League club these days, it's a lot of money. I don't know what the cheapest season ticket is in the Premier League, but it's well over £700 a year. Just for a season. That just gives you home games as well. That doesn't include away games. I think the cheapest season ticket at Arsenal is about £900. The cheapest. Yeah. I think it's something like that. Another football channel I watched as well, they went to a West Ham game, just a random game, and they got a awful seat near the top where you could barely see anything, and the tickets were £50 each. And when I used to go to Bradford City games, I used to get my tickets for a £5. If you wanted a seat in the Kop, where the atmosphere is the best, it was £15 to £20, depending on demand and what kind of game it was. So if it was a big game against someone like Rotherham or Huddersfield, like a rival game, they'd charge a little bit more. But our season tickets back then were like £200 for the season. They're a bit more now. They're about £250 either, or £300, but it's still the cheapest season ticket in professional football in England. Always has been.
Up until 1883, that is. Blackburn Olympic defeated the Old Etonians by 2-1 in the 1882-83 FA Cup final, and the Olympic captain, Albert Warburton, puffed his chest out to the press and reportedly said that the cup is very welcome to Lancashire, it'll have a good home, and it'll never go back to London. The boys down in London were not happy about this, mostly because they were sure that the working class players were receiving payments by the club to train up to that level and play, which of course was illegal, even though most teams were suspected of doing this. As far as Olympic was concerned, nothing was proven at the time. It got to the point where so many clubs, mainly Northern, were openly signing players on side jobs for the club. Some real, some not so much. What I'm trying to say is that these players weren't signed as players. Dishwashers or groundskeepers or something of the sort. Blackburn Rovers, close neighbours of Olympic, were closer to a middle-class club and were one such club that was highly suspected of paying their players, a lot of them Scottish. And depending on who you ask, it seems as though the Scottish influence of passing over brute strength is what set them apart from the rest of the English teams. But you didn't hear this from me. Blackburn Rovers won the FA Cup 3 seasons in a row from 1883 to 1886, so they clearly had an edge. In any case, the FA were faced with the decision of,
Blackburn the 1884 and 1885 FA Cup finals were against a Scottish club. Is that what that's saying? Queen's Park? That's a Scottish club. Hang on, let me check that. Let me check that. 1884. FA Cup final. 1884 FA Cup final. The 1884 FA Cup final was contested on the 29th of March 1884 between Blackburn Rovers and Queen's Park. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that in the early days the FA Cup final included Scottish teams. When did that stop then? This final was notable as it was the first time a Scottish team reached the final. That is honestly the first time I've ever learned. I'm learning about this for the first time, that Scottish teams were able to enter the FA Cup back then. Blimey. Attendance between 10 and 12,000, making it one of the most attended matches in London at the time. At Kennington Oval. That doesn't even exist now, does it? Kennington Oval? Never heard of it. But yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing. Wow. Well, there you go. See, this guy's video, I always learn something new when I watch his videos. He's brilliant.
In a row from 1883 to 1886, so they clearly had an edge. In any case, the FA were faced with the decision of either letting the sport become professional or having what were at that point the best teams in the country leave and form their own association. They chose the former. And as for Blackburn Olympic, they added a lot of kindling to the fire that eventually led to the legalization of players getting paid to play. However, they themselves found it hard to find sponsors when it happened. Players across town at Rovers were earning 4 to 5 times more than them, so naturally many players jumped ship. And by 1988, when the first division was born, only one team from each town was permitted to join the league. Rovers got in, and Olympic folded. Truly, I didn't mean to go into this much detail about a team not named Blackburn Rovers in a Blackburn Rovers video, but here we are.
No, I'm glad you did, bro, because otherwise I would have never have known that little nugget of information, and that is so interesting. There was another team in Blackburn that could have existed other than Blackburn Rovers, Blackburn Olympic. But because Rovers players back then were being paid 4 times as much as players for Blackburn Olympic were being paid, realistically, they were the only team that were ever going to join the professional system when it was established, because they had more money. So I'm glad that you've mentioned that. See, this guy, he mentions things nobody else thinks to mention. It's a proper deep dive. I love it.
Moving along. Along with their FA Cup triple in the early 1880s, Blackburn Rovers added 2 more FA Cup titles to their trophy cabinet in both 1890 and 1891, meaning that they had won the country's premier football competition 5 times, more than anyone else. Well, bar Wanderers FC, who dissolved in 1887. And no one has won 3 in a row since they did it.
No one's won 3 FA Cups in a row since Blackburn Rovers did it. In the 1880s. That's crazy. That really is unbelievable. So, nobody's won 3 FA Cups in a row since the 19th century. That's... You know, teams win 2 or 3 Premier League titles in a row quite often. Man United did it between 2007 and 2009. Man City did it between 2016 and 2019. Or was it a bit after? Well, Man City won it 3 times in a row. I'm sure they did, not that long ago. Chelsea nearly did it. They won it twice in a row, didn't they? Yeah, it's just... Wow, that's an amazing record to hold. 3 FA Cups in a row. No one's done it for that long. That's unbelievable.
involved in 1887, and no one has won 3 in a row since they did it. They officially moved into Ewood Park in 1890, and this has been their home ever since. Although you'd have to imagine that it was nothing more than a patch of grass at the time. Big bucks were spent to renovate it in 1905 to a respectable state. £1,680. That's a lot of change. Rovers were taken very seriously. And even though the turn of the century meant that they saw a dip in their FA Cup performances, they remained in the top division indefinitely, while the likes of Preston, Sunderland and Sheffield Wednesday were...
Wow, look at the league table in 1887. You've got a couple of clubs. Yep. Preston North End in 4th, Aston Villa winning the league, Sheffield United finishing 2nd. And they only played 30 games in those days as well. Crazy, isn't it? How did the point system work back then, though? Because Aston Villa won 21 games and drew 5, but they only ended up with 47 points. So, was a win only worth 2 points in those days? Yeah, it must have been. And a draw was worth 1. Yeah, so 2 times 21 is 42, plus 5, 47. Right, yep, got it.
Winning the league one year and getting relegated the next, Rovers were comfortably mid-table throughout. The only other team with as much staying power as them was Aston Villa. Rovers would go on to claim their first league title soon after though, one in 1912 and another one in 1914, followed by a 6th FA Cup win. Unfortunately, their luck ran out in 1936.
So by 1914, Blackburn Rovers had won 6 FA Cups and 2 First Division titles. So in terms of records, honours records, by that year, 1914, they were one of the most successful clubs in England.
6th FA Cup win. Unfortunately, their luck ran out in 1936. Relegation for the first time in their history. And as if the scriptwriters in a Bayer Leverkusen match were around back in 1936.
Wow, Aston Villa were relegated as well, and they were the most successful team in the era that he was just talking about. Oh, look who was in the First Division then. Blackburn, Aston Villa, Liverpool finished 19th. Everton finished 6th. Grimsby Town were in the First Division. Wolves were 15th. Middlesbrough 14th. Bolton, Birmingham, Leeds United, Portsmouth, Man City, Chelsea, Preston, Arsenal, Brentford, who are now back in the Premier League. Huddersfield, Derby, Sunderland. Yeah, Sunderland were a big club back in the day as well. Sunderland are one of the biggest clubs in England.
So were Aston Villa. As of these two...
But no Newcastle, no Man United. No Tottenham. Is there? No Tottenham Hotspur. And I'm pretty sure Tottenham Hotspur existed by the 1930s. Yeah, they definitely did. Yeah. Wow. Do you know, one of the things when it comes to football that I love doing the most is looking at league tables from before the Second World War. It's unbelievable, the teams that you see in the First Division. You know, the amount of clubs that you find that don't even exist anymore or are in the 9th tier of English football now. It's unbelievable. It's crazy.
Teams going down, every founding member of the league had now faced the drop. Rovers fought their way back only 2 seasons later to gain promotion in 1939 though. Football took a back seat thanks to global politics around this time. But if we jump forward about a decade, football was so back. However, Blackburn were back to the drawing board. Another relegation in 1948. Yet this relegation was different. It marked the beginning of a pretty notable tradition, the burial of the coffin. And before you ask, Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. This is a
video's
tradition
ridiculous.
shared by both Blackburn Rovers and Preston North End supporters. Whenever one of these teams is relegated, a physical coffin representing the team is buried. Back then, the coffin was filled with vegetables to represent the players, but now it's a children's doll because vegetables rot. The burial was originally conducted in Bamber Bridge, Preston, but due to fears of public
That is a very strange, of course, because first time I'm hearing it, strange, but also interesting tradition. So whenever Blackburn or Preston North End get relegated, the fans bury a coffin full of children's teddy bears, representing the players. Although back then, they filled it with vegetables. I bet the real reason that they're not allowed to do that anymore is because it's offensive to call the players vegetables. Because it's offensive. But that's a really interesting tradition. I wonder if any other clubs have any traditions like that for when they get relegated or when something bad happens to them. Because all clubs have their traditions and things, you know. Every club has something that makes it unique in terms of a tradition or something they do. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. The fact that Blackburn and Preston bury a coffin every time they're relegated. Preston haven't had to do that for a long time. They've been in the Championship for a while now, haven't they? I think they've been in the Championship for the whole 21st century. I don't think I've seen them get relegated in my life for the Championship. They've nearly been promoted to the Premier League. They've come very close a few times, but I don't think I've seen them relegated. They might have, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, Blackburn, wow, that's interesting.
The burial was originally conducted in Bamber Bridge, Preston, but due to fears of public disorder,
The police here, Blackburn relegation ceremony has been held in
the
Preston.
parades have since been held in the respective towns of each team. In 2011, when Preston North End were relegated from the Championship to League
Yeah, they were, yeah. But see, yeah. Come on, guys. It was in 2011. That's 15 years ago. And 2011 wasn't exactly a landmark year for me as a football fan. We had nothing to celebrate. What did I have to celebrate in 2011 as a Bradford City fan? Yay! We stayed in the fucking 4th division again. We're not going down or up. Yay! Come on.
One, the chairman of the burial
Mind you, the season after, we had plenty to shout about.
organizing committee, Mick Higgins, said, "We hope many people get involved and donate
the
to the
season
great
after
cause
all?
that the committee have chosen and celebrate a family fun day, a tradition that we don't want to let die. And for good reason
Keep
too.
it going,
The whole
yeah.
premise is that when promotion is achieved, the coffin is dug up and its contents, which in this case would be the team, are risen once again. I mean, it's not like most people need a reason to party. Plus, the donations go
Not
to
in the
charity.
UK.
Despite the fact that it's a funeral, it's clearly not much of a dreary affair. I quite like the idea, if I'm honest with you. And party
Yeah.
is exactly what the fans of this club did.
So when these clubs are promoted again, they dig up the coffin as a metaphorical gesture. Right. I love weird little traditions like this. There's so many of them in England, you know, there's so many weird things people in towns do. I love that. You know, we've got so many weird hobbies that we do in England, like cheese rolling and, you know, things like that. I'm sure anybody who watches those American reaction channels that react to weird things about the UK, you know, there's so many of them. But I really like that. Yeah.
10 years later, when they were promoted back up to the First Division in 1958. During their time back up in the top division, they returned to their position around the mid-table range. There were some bright sparks though. In 1960, Blackburn reached the FA Cup final, but they lost 3-0 to Wolves. In 1963, they were top of the table on Boxing Day, but they couldn't keep up the performances and eventually finished the season in 7th place.
Even in the 60s, Tottenham were finishing 4th. well, actually, that joke isn't exactly relevant anymore. Tottenham will be lucky if they finish 14th this season. Never mind 4th. Do you know what? I actually saw a video from another football channel today saying that the best thing for the club is for them to be relegated this season. Because every big club that's been relegated from the Premier League, so Aston Villa, West Ham, Newcastle United, clubs like that have been relegated, have had a resurgence when they've come back. So when West Ham came back up, they finished 8th and they won the Conference League and had a good run. And they're struggling again now, but since they've come back up, they had a good run for a few years. Look at Aston Villa now. They're in the title race this season. I don't care what anyone says. They're in the title race as much as anybody else. Newcastle, richest club in the world. I think Tottenham need to go down. I agree with what he was saying. They need to go down so that they can get rid of all the toxic shite in the club that's making it as bad as it is, and then they can sort of rebuild. But, you know, I don't know. It would be weird seeing that stadium in the Championship, seeing Lincoln City fans roll up to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It'd be weird, wouldn't it? So who are we hosting at our £2.8 billion NFL standard stadium with an entirely retractable pitch this weekend? Manchester United? Juventus? PSG? No, Sheffield Wednesday. Fucking hell. Yeah, it'd be weird, but the points he was making as to why he thought it was a good idea made sense. But let me know what you think.
Were relegated 2 years later, and then again a further 4 years later. In fact, until the late 80s, there was not much other than disappointment. Rovers failed to establish a grip on top-flight football, or even second division football for that matter. They needed help. They needed someone special to step up and turn them into the team that they were always meant to be.
Local lad.
We're now in the 1980s. As Blackburn were toiling in obscurity, frustrations among the town and the support had begun to bubble up to the surface in a very big way. Once a powerhouse in English football, now nothing but an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. Lucky for them, there was one man that had seen enough. A man that wanted nothing but to see his boyhood club succeed and take their rightful place at the top of the pile. That man was Jack Walker. Industrial magnate, serial entrepreneur, born in Blackburn, Rovers supporter. Walker was born in 1929 as one of 3 children. School wasn't exactly his thing, as he left formal education at the age of 14. He began working as a sheet metal worker and a conscripted craftsman with the military. When he was about 22 years old in 1951, his father passed on and him and his siblings were tasked with taking over the family business. At the time, this family business was simply just a small scrap metal business in the back streets of Blackburn. Reportedly, in 1956, the business was operating at a revenue of £46,000 per year. Fast forward to 1988, and the business was turning over £48 million per year. Walker Steel was a runner.
Walker Steel! I always remember seeing billboards with that written on when I watch documentaries about old Premier League seasons. You know, whenever it'd show a Blackburn game, the stadium would have signs going around the stadium saying that, Walker Steel. So that was his company, right? That's where it comes from.
Was turning over £48 million.
£48 million it turned over in, wow.
Pounds per year. Walker Steel was.
And in 1994, you didn't need much more than that to build a team capable of doing well in the Premier League.
Was a runaway success. And so, Walker did what many would do later in life after building the business up to such a powerhouse. He sold it for roughly £360 million in 1990. At this point,
He sold the family business for 300 and what?
he sold it for roughly £360 million in
360 million pounds in 1990. So with inflation, that's about £500 million in today's money. Wow. So I can see where this story's going to go then. So he sold Walker Steel in 1990 for £360 million, and then he became the owner of Blackburn and invested it all into the club and made them Premier League champions. Is that what it's going to turn out to be? How much of that would he have had to spend, though, to do that? Because I can't remember how many of the great players in that Blackburn squad were already there. And I know Kenny Dalglish wasn't there. I know he was brought in, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure Dalglish wasn't at Blackburn, struggling in mid-table in 1990. For 4 years before they won the Premier League, or however many years it was. So he'd have had to spend a bit of money.
1990. At this point, Walker was estimated to have amassed a fortune of about £600 million.
He was worth £600 million in 1990. Wow, that. So again, when using inflation, he was probably the first British billionaire then, or one of the first. £600 million in 1990 would not be far off $1 billion in today's money.
Which placed him as the 21st richest man in all of Britain. It's quite
21st richest man in the UK. Wow.
the story. Naturally, when you reach this
Do you know, it's funny? That just shows how much football has changed. So this guy was worth £600 million in 1990, took over Blackburn Rovers, invested however much of that he invested, and made them Premier League champions. But do you know, if a guy worth £600 million took over a club like my club, Bradford City, he wouldn't be able to make us Premier League champions with that. He'd get us out of League One, and it'd probably get us to the Premier League, and we'd probably finish mid-table for about 5-10 years. We'd probably do a Bournemouth. You know, what Bournemouth did the first time they were promoted to the Premier League. They stayed in the league for a few years, and then they got relegated and bounced straight back. That's probably about as much as that amount of money would manage. But back then, that got you a Premier League crown. Yeah, these days, it gets you nothing. It's just meant to. I mean, look at Liverpool. They won the Premier League last season, and then in the summer, they spent all that money on all those they spent 125 million on Florian Wirtz, another 100 million on Isak. However much they spent on Dominic Szoboszlai. They spent about £400 million on new players, and they're worse. Much worse. They're nowhere fucking near winning the league this season. So, you know, the fact that this video's about to tell me that this guy was worth that much in 1990 and won the league with Blackburn, and nowadays that'd get you absolutely nowhere. You cannot take over a Premier League club and expect to become successful unless you are a multi-billionaire these days. Not millionaire, billionaire with a B. You cannot be a millionaire and own a Premier League club and expect to be successful. It's just not possible anymore. That's the level, financial level that the Premier League has gone to now. It's just, it's crazy. Whenever you watch something like this about football from 30, 40 years ago, whenever they're talking about wages or transfer fees or how much a particular owner of a successful club was worth or whatever, you know, like see documentaries about Man United and you hear that he bought players that you've heard mentioned in the Hall of Fame for like 5 million quid, and you're like, what? You know, nobody spends £5 million on a player in the Premier League these days, unless it's some 19-year-old kid from Oxford United or Walsall with a bit of potential. You know, it's mental.
Kind of success in life, one of your first instincts is what? I'll give you a couple of seconds. That's right. Paying as little tax as possible. Walker moved to the Channel Islands, more specifically Jersey, way back in the 70s. When he arrived there, he almost immediately took an interest in the local football scene. This was apparently thanks to his postman talking his ear off about the Jersey League champions, First Tower United. Walker became very intertwined with the club from then on. He had his airline company, Jersey European Airways, sponsor the Jersey Football Club and the Jersey Rugby Club. He became friends with the club officials and league officials, funding the training grounds for the club.
Wait, it's one of the British Isles that the smallest football league system in the world exists. Isn't that in Jersey? Isn't it Jersey and Guernsey? There's literally 2 teams in the entire division. They just play each other 14 times a season. They literally play each other 14 times a season over the course of like 6-7 months. It's the smallest football division in the world. 2 teams in the entire league. Isn't that between Jersey and Guernsey? Just 1 team on each island? Or is it another set of islands in the Orkneys or something? I don't know, but I'm sure it's a couple of islands off the coast of, like, it's somewhere in the British Isles. I know for a fact it's in the British Isles where the smallest football division exists, and there's 2 teams. They call it a league. Yeah, they play the league. 2 teams play the league 14 times. They play each other home and away each season, and whoever beats the other the most wins the league title. Because there's no other teams, because the islands are fucking tiny. I think that's epic. I'd love to, you know, if they record these matches, I'd watch them. I would literally watch these 2 teams playing each other. When I saw it, I saw pictures of the games, and it was like looking at the football tournaments that I used to go to as a kid. It's just playing fields and about 50 people stood around the pitch, around the side of the pitch, watching it. But that's their Premier League, and they love it. So, you know, good for them. But yeah, imagine that, a football division with 2 teams in it. It's hilarious.
He became friends with the club officials and league officials, funding the training grounds for the club, hosting lavish parties for those involved with the club after match days. He sometimes even invited the teams that they were playing against on the day to those parties. I get just as much joy from First Tower as I do from watching Rovers. I'm just a dedicated supporter. I've traveled to matches with them on the coach when the windows have been frozen outside and in. I come to every game and reserve games. I just love it. I even get drunk with them. From these words by the man himself, it's obvious to all that he was just a guy with insane business acumen that just so happened to be a huge football nerd.
He's absolutely minted, yet he sounds so, yeah.
A very down-to-earth man who loves nothing better than having a drink and a chip butty with the boys after the game.
Yeah, he sounds like that sort of bloke. And that's a staff member from the football team in Jersey. You would never know he had so much money. Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from this guy. He seems like such a down-to-earth bloke, yeah.
You'd never know he had so much money. Colin Jones, the secretary of First Tower United, once said this about the man, which is sweet.
Yeah.
But, of course, Walker did have
money.
Lots of it. And I suspect that he always had a plan for it. A plan that would shake things up in a very big way up north.
Return of the King.
I now have the time to do what I always wanted to do. and be involved in Blackburn Rovers.
As we've already mentioned, Jack Walker was a lifelong Blackburn Rovers fan. He had been in attendance for several matches in his youth and several more as he began to build his enormous
You see,
fortune. So it should come as no surprise that he had helped Blackburn out many times before having any official involvement with the club.
Really?
For example, in 1988, Walker donated construction materials to the club for the new Riverside stand at Ewood Park. Now, that is
That's
official knowledge, but it's also widely believed that he was behind the signings of Ozzy Ardiles and Steve Archibald the year before, both highly renowned players that may have been late in their careers, 31 and 35 respectively,
Yeah.
but were of a high enough profile that you wouldn't think that they'd go to second division side Blackburn. 3 years in a row, Blackburn finished in 5th in the second division between 1988 and 1990. Each time they qualified for the playoffs.
that second screenshot of the 1988 top 5 of the second division, the two teams that got promoted into the first division, Chelsea and Man City. Again, when you see old league tables and you see teams like that in what's now the championship, it's just mental, isn't it? Chelsea and Man City were in the championship and they got promoted from it together in the same season. It's just fucking crazy to even think of that these days. 'Cause Chelsea and Man City are now two of the most successful clubs of the 21st century. Well, Man City are the most... I think Man City have surpassed Man United now, haven't they? As being the most successful English club of the 21st century. Man United stopped winning titles after 2013. And Man City have been winning them ever since. And they've won more league titles in terms of... They've had a higher hit rate. I mean, there was that period where they won the League Cup like 6 seasons in a row. Man United only won the Champions League once in this century as well. They reached the final another 2 times, but they only won it once, so Man City have equalled that as well. They've also won a bunch of FA Cups. Man United only won the FA Cup in 2004 and 2016. Is there any other time they've won it? So, Man City are either very close or have already overtaken Man United as the most successful club of this century. English club of this century. So yeah, when you see that, it's crazy.
But never did enough to make it through. By early 1990, Walker had made his move official and was the new owner of Blackburn Rovers. And he had big plans, alright. Bear in mind that at this point, when it came to football, Walker was relatively unknown outside of Blackburn,
Senior
that
Vice
is,
President.
and he preferred it that way. Him taking over the club never made national news immediately. However, what did make national news was when Rovers, a second division side, somehow managed to persuade Kenny Dalglish, King Kenny Dalglish, to join them.
This guy got Kenny Dalglish to become their manager when they were in the second division. How the hell did he do that? Because, wasn't he at Nottingham Forest before? Who took over Brian Clough at Forest in the 90s? Who was it? I'm sure it was Dalglish. Or am I thinking of somebody? Oh, I don't know. He might mention it, but yeah, that is crazy. Kenny Dalglish was like, in terms of like stock, he was like Thomas Tuchel or Pochettino in the modern era in the 90s. He was one of the biggest managers in the world. And they got him to join second division Blackburn. That is crazy. Fucking hell, no wonder they did so well.
As their manager. Now,
I mean, I know he was the manager when they won the league, but this is from the early beginnings. This is from when they were in what's now the Championship and had to get back into the first division. I didn't realise that he was with them for that long.
Kenny Dalglish is not only Scotland's greatest player of all time, but also one of Liverpool's greatest players and then coaches.
Yeah.
He won 4 Scottish Premier Divisions with Celtic and 6 First Divisions and 3 European Cups with Liverpool.
Do you know, when you look at players at English clubs that won the most honours. Obviously, the first player that you think of is Ryan Giggs, because he holds all the records. He has every record. He's the most decorated player in history. But Kenny Dalglish, the record he has with Liverpool as a player is crazy. 6 First Division titles, 3 European Cups. No British player has ever matched that. No British player has ever won 3 European Cups. You know? I think Gary Neville and Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs are the only players that have ever come close to even matching that, because they won 2 with Man United. But no players have ever come close to beating that record. 3 European Cups. That is... I don't think people realise just how unbelievable his record is. And how it probably will never be beaten. Unless Man City sort their shit out and win the Champions League 3 more times within the next 5 seasons, and Phil Foden stays until he's at least 31, then he might match the record and then break it, because he's on 1. He's been... How long has he been there, Phil Foden? He's been there... He's what, 24 now? 23, 24? And he's been involved in at least 3 Premier League titles. I think he's won 3. So he needs to win 4 more league titles and 3 more Champions Leagues to beat his record. He needs to win 2 more to match it and 3 more to beat it. But now you've got Newcastle being taken over by the royal family of the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, which is the most... the biggest fund of its type in the world. Yeah. You've got Arsenal suddenly doing a resurgence. Yeah. It's just one of those records that you look at and you think, well, will anybody ever beat that? Like, all of Ryan Giggs' records. No one will ever top those. James Milner's record of the most Premier League appearances. And he's never lost a Premier League game in which he's scored. No one will ever beat that. It's just one of those records that you look at and you think, no one's going to even get near that.
As a player, as a manager, he won a further 3 First Divisions with Liverpool, with the most recent one being...
And then as manager, he won another 3 league titles. That's just mental.
About 15 months before he joined Blackburn. It's almost like Jurgen Klopp going to manage Blackburn right now. This was huge.
Yeah.
Another reason that this made news was that Dalglish had...
Yeah. So that's where he was before he went to Blackburn. He was the Liverpool manager off the back of 3 First Division wins as manager, and then he went down a league to manage Blackburn. How much must Jack Walker have had to pay him to take that job? Jesus Christ. It's like, it's like Wrexham. Me and my mum started watching the Wrexham documentary, and when they got Phil Parkinson while they were still in the conference, he was the Bradford City manager when we got to the League Cup final. How much must they have had to fucking pay that guy to even take that job? And the players they were bringing in as well from, like, League One, the Championship, and these weren't like the reserve players from Championship and League One teams. These were the best players from League One teams, like Paul Mullin and fucking... Oh, what's the name of the other guy, the striker? Oh, what's his fucking name? Oh, never mind. But yeah, they brought in this striker very good striker, and they brought in a lot of players from League One and League Two clubs that were like the best players in these teams. So how much must they have had to pay him to take
resigned as Liverpool manager in February of 1991, citing stress from the job and the Hillsborough disaster. forever at the forefront of his mind. When he resigned,
yeah,
Liverpool were
he was the
3
manager
points
during
ahead
that,
at the
wasn't
top
he?
of the
Yeah.
table. They were second by the end of the season. Most people weren't too upset by his resignation, all things considered, given the context. However, when he returned to management only 8 months later with Moneybag's second division Blackburn Rovers, many felt a certain way about it. Nonetheless, this was a huge deal for Blackburn. People were paying attention. And, more importantly,
I bet.
players were paying attention. In his first year in charge, Blackburn finished in 6th, just enough to qualify for the playoffs, and they broke their duck, making it to the Premier League for its inaugural season. This was thanks to them
Wow.
defeating Leicester.
First season, they got promoted via the playoffs. But then again, of course they did. Kenny Dalglish was their manager. This is what, 1990? What season did it say this was? So, Alex Ferguson had been at Man United for about 5 years at this point and still hadn't won anything. So he wasn't the best manager of all time yet, or even close. Wenger was still about 10 years away from being the Arsenal manager. Well, not 10 years, but not far off. So Dalglish was probably the best manager in the world at this point. Or maybe Van Gaal was. Actually, no, I'm going to retract. Yeah, there was still quite a few big managers, but he was one of the best. Dalglish was one of the best managers in the world at this point. So no wonder he got him promoted straight away.
Leicester City in the playoffs.
Splash.
Now in the country's Premier Division, there was a lot of work to be done, and the work was done very well, as evidenced by Blackburn Rovers finishing 4th in their first year back. The next year, they came 2nd. At the end of the previous
They finished 4th and 2nd in their first 2 seasons back in the Premier League. That is fucking mental. Wow, and look, second season back in the Premier League, they only finished 8 points behind Man United. That's crazy. So they were only 8 points off winning the Premier League. Oh, no, sorry, the first division. 42 games played. Was it the Premier League or the first division? Or wasn't the first couple of seasons of the Premier League still under the old format of 42 games? And then it went to 38 a few years after? Yeah, I think that's what it was, wasn't it? Yeah. But yeah, they weren't far off winning it in only their second season. That is mental.
4th in their first year back. The next
But Norwich City finishing 3rd?
year, they came 2nd. At the end of the previous season, Blackburn were rocking a second division squad, but they had European ambitions. Cash needed to be splashed. Ewood Park was upgraded to the cost of roughly £20 million, extending its
20 million
capacity to
pounds?
around 30,000 people. Tim Flowers, the most
That's all it took to build Ewood Park, £20 million. So Jack Walker was worth £600 million. And it only cost him 20 million to expand it to 30,000. And that's the stadium that they've still got. So if you can fill a 30,000 seater stadium every home game, that's a nice bit of revenue per season. They're playing in the Championship, so that's, 23 games a season that they're getting that revenue, not including cup games as well. So if they get a few cup games at home as well, yeah, so that's a legacy. Mind you, one thing I am very aware of with Blackburn these days is that their owners are basically cunts. They have some of the worst owners in English football. I know that for a fact. I've spoken to a few Blackburn Rovers fans online, and I remember when they were in League One, in the banter group, whenever they were doing badly or something happened that made them the talk of the group that week, there was always comments blaming the owners. They hated the owners. And I remember the hashtag, it said, something Y out. Something Vendy's is it Venky? Venky's out. Yeah, Venky's out. That hashtag dominated the group when they were in it. When they were in League One and Blackburn Rovers fans had to join the EFL League One Facebook group, that hashtag dominated the group. Even though they were doing well and they got promoted, they still hated the owners and wanted them gone.
Expensive goalkeeper in England, Henning Berg, Colin Hendry, Kevin Gallagher, Ian Pearce, David Batty, Paul Warhurst, Graham Lasso, Stuart Ripley,
Wow, look at those players. Graham Lasso, Tim Sherwood, Ian Pearce, I've heard of him, Kevin Gallagher, Colin Hendry, I've heard of him, David Batty, heard of him, I think I've heard of Paul Warhurst as well. Yeah, Graham Lasso was a great player.
Sherwood and Jason Wilcox were amongst the most prominent players that were brought in for the project in the 4 years between 1991 and 1994. Many made up the core of the squad. Cumulatively, the signings in this period accounted for £25 million. And remember, this was before the boom in TV revenue. Even though a quarter of a Caicedo may sound like
it cost them £25 million to sign all those good players. And I know he's saying it's before all the TV money of the Premier League came in, but Jack Walker was worth £600 million. So up to this point, he's spent £20 million on the stadium and £25 million on the players. So he spent £45 million. So he's still one of the richest men in England. And bought a team capable of finishing in the top 4 of the First Division. That's not bad going. Depending on what his net worth was, he's still worth over 500 million quid, and he's got the team that he's supported since he was a boy to finish in the top 4 of the First Division. He's not done bad, and he was still going to take them on to win the Premier League. So, however this goes, I think this guy did pretty well.
It's not that much in today's day and age. Back then, it very much was. The crown jewels amongst the lot were Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton. Both players broke the British transfer record when they transferred over to Blackburn Rovers. £3.6 million and 5...
Broke the British transfer record. £3.6 million. Oh, God, again, it's just things like that when you hear them and you're like, what has happened to football? That was the British transfer record at once upon a time. £3.6 million. That is literally... Cristiano Ronaldo earns more than that per week in wages now for Al Nassr. I think they're paying him about £4 million now a week. Because he hates it. He hates the club because they promised him that they would spend money on bringing in other players to make them the best team in the Saudi Arabian league, which they haven't. So now he wants to leave. He hates it. So they've kept upping his wages and paying him more money so that he won't. And I think his wage now it's getting closer and closer to £5 million a week. I think he's on about 3.8, 3.8. I'm sure I've seen that it's not far off £4 million a week, including everything. Like his playing wage might be like £1.8 million. That's how much he gets paid for actually playing 90 minutes of football per week. But when it like bonuses, so goal scoring bonuses, the fact that the club are going to sell like 50 million shirts around the world with his name and number on the back of it, things like that. When you factor in everything, that club is paying him not far off £5 million a week. Yeah. And in 1993 or 1994 or whenever that was the British transfer record. Fuck me! And Liverpool broke it in the last summer, to bring in Florian Wirtz for 125 million quid. Wow. It's just unbelievable.
Record when they transferred over to Blackburn Rovers. £3.6 million and £5 million. And for good reason too. Chris Sutton was flying high with Norwich City when
So Shearer was actually the cheapest of the two players. Chris Sutton cost 5 million and Shearer was 3.6 million. And which one would you rather have? If you could pick one of these two players to join your club in that year and stay at your club for the rest of their career, but have the same career that they went on to have, who would you pick? You'd pick Shearer, wouldn't you? Because he'd go on to score 260 Premier League goals for you.
Moved over to Rovers in '94, 25 goals in the league with the Canaries. Alan Shearer, in particular, was a real coup. The Geordie-born 22-year-old was tearing it up with Southampton. 13 goals with them in the league.
13 goals in 41 games for Southampton. Before he went to Blackburn, Alan Shearer. That's not many. That's not a great record for a striker. These days that'd be considered a poor record. I mean, I think Gyökeres at Arsenal, his record's not far off that, and people are considering him a poor signing this season. But look at what he became. So, yeah.
League and an England call-up. And his game was about so much more than goal scoring. He was a player's player, strong on both feet and not shy of dropping deep thanks to his upbringing as a midfielder. When the 1991-92 season was coming to a close, Ian Branfoot labelled himself as the most popular manager in English football, as his phone wouldn't stop ringing with clubs trying to pry Shearer from him. Manchester United, Liverpool, Newcastle, and more.
Can you imagine if Man United had bought Alan Shearer in that era, that year? Imagine the team that they'd have. They'd have had Shearer, Cantona, and who else would they have? Well, do you know? I don't think if they'd have managed to get hold of Shearer, I don't think Fergie had gone for the other players that he went for, like Andy Cole, Dwight York. He wouldn't need them. But still, let's say that he did go for those players, as well as having Shearer. All the seasons that they didn't win the league, they would have done. You know? They wouldn't have missed a single league title up until about 2001. When did Shearer retire? Was it 2002, 2003? If he'd have joined Man United in 1992 and stayed there until he retired, they would not have missed out on a single league title. They just wouldn't. If they'd have bought the same players that they did in those seasons. And then you'd have had him in the team with Beckham, Giggs, Neville, Scholes coming through, Nicky Butt coming through. Jesus, imagine that.
They all wanted a piece of him, but it was Jack Walker who managed to convince him to join. Perhaps it was the allure of this exciting new project. Perhaps it was the £10,000 that he was on when he signed, the highest in the league. Perhaps it was managed to convince him to join. Perhaps he wanted a piece of him, but it was Jack Walker who managed to convince him to join. Perhaps it was the allure of this exciting new project. Perhaps it was the £10,000 that he was on when he signed.
£10,000 a week was what Alan Shearer was on at Blackburn Rovers. And that is what's considered. So Alan Shearer turned down all the biggest clubs in England in favour of Blackburn Rovers just because they offered to pay him £10,000 a week. That's the wage that made Alan Shearer say no to Man United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea. Wow. Fuck me. I think fucking Erling Haaland's goal bonus that he gets isn't far off 10 grand nowadays. And that was his entire wage back then. Oh my God. See, this is why I love watching videos like this. When you learn about things like this, the wages that literally the best players in the entire league were on. Because Shearer, he's the all-time highest goal scorer in the Premier League, Alan Shearer, and he was on 10 grand a week. That is crazy. You know? There's players in Yeah, there will be. There'll be players at the clubs that were relegated from the Championship last season that are now in League One this season with my club, Bradford City, that stuck with their clubs instead of leaving to go to stay in the Championship and join another club in the Championship that will be on 10 grand a week now. 2 divisions below the Premier League. Yet in those days, that was the wage of the player that would go on to become the highest scoring player in the division's history. That is mental.
And the highest in the league. Who knows? But
that was the that was the highest wage in the league. What the fuck? That what he's just said it. He's just said it. Nothing this guy says in his videos is ever a lie or clickbait. It's always 100% facts. 10 grand a week was the highest wage in the Premier League. He just said that. Jesus Christ. So what was Cantona on then? If Alan Shearer was on 10 grand a week and that was the most anyone was being paid. What was Lasso on? What was Chris Sutton on? What was all the huge players at Leeds United on? Eh? That is mad. The highest wage in the Premier League was £10,000 a week. What's it now? About... Well, I remember when Man United brought Alexis Sanchez in from Arsenal. They were and that was in 2018, 2019, and they were paying him 500 grand a week. And I think that was the highest wage in the league. But it didn't stay the highest for long. And that was like 7, 8, 9 years ago. So I dread to think what it is now.
according to Mark Adkins, who was at the club since before the Walker takeover, the defining factor in this decision was King Kenny. You see, Dalglish was one of Shearer's biggest heroes. I'm sure the 10k was nice too. By very many accounts, Kenny
Dalglish was one of Alan Shearer's heroes, so that lured him even more. Right, that makes sense.
Shearer's biggest heroes. I'm sure the 10k was nice too. By very many accounts, Kenny Dalglish was the ultimate key that made everything come together and make all of this possible. At the same time though, when we're talking about the overarching picture, and while we're on the topic of splashing cash, this seems as good a time as ever to bring up the age-old argument of comparative spend. Blackburn Rovers spent a lot of money on football players, sure, but most of it went towards Shearer, Sutton and Flower.
Oh, we can see the fees. Right. Blackburn Rovers only paid 700 grand for Graham Lasso. That is crazy. That is a bargain. I know it was in 1993, but still, that is a bargain. For a player as good as him, I don't think people realise just how good Graham Lasso was. He was a brilliant player. Jason Wilcox came through the youth academy. 5 million for Sutton, 3.6 million for Shearer, 1.7 million for Stuart Ripley, 2.4 million for Tim Flowers. They only paid 650 grand for Tim Sherwood. That's a bargain. And he was their captain. 400 grand. 40 grand for Mark Atkins. That's... So this is the squad that won the... Yeah, Blackburn Rovers squad, 94-95. That's the season they won it, isn't it? So this is the squad that won the Premier League. And they've got a player here that's worth 40 grand. One here worth 300 grand, 400 grand. One from the youth academy, so it didn't cost them a penny. 650 grand, 700 grand, 700... What the fuck? That's mad. That is absolutely mad. How many players is there here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this must be the full squad then. Wow. This is a Premier League winning squad. Five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's worth about 15 million quid. This squad put together is about 15 million pounds. Fucking hell.
Blackburn's first team squad by 1995 cost them just.
I mean, teams like Tottenham or Brighton pay 15 million pounds for players that are going to be the backup players to first team players that are going to 15 million pounds for players that are going to sit on the bench these days. You know, 15 million quid buys you a backup player for your best striker or your best midfielder or your best winger. And in 1994, it bought you a squad that won you the league. That just, oh my good lord.
Shy of 15 million pounds. The three I just mentioned accounted for about 11 million of that. Liverpool was likely a little irritated that their hyper-successful former manager was now competing with them on the transfer market. And I only mentioned Liverpool here to point out the fact that Blackburn weren't the only team that was spending big. Manchester United squad in 1995 cost them about 19 million pounds. Newcastle had paid about 2 million for a 21-year-old Andy.
Yeah, Newcastle paid 2 million for Andy Cole and 2.7 for Darren Peacock, yeah.
Cole and 2.7 million for Darren Peacock in 94. Carlton Palmer went to Leeds for 2.6.
Cole Palmer, 2.6 million to Leeds United in 1994.
Million in 94. And Phil Babb and John Scales went to Liverpool for 3.6 million each in the same year. Now, for Rovers, I also acknowledge that we have the fee of Dalglish, which has never been revealed, but which you'd.
The fee of Dalglish has never been revealed. Why? Oh, come on. It must be in the old records at Blackburn somewhere, how much they paid him to be their manager. Oh, I'd love to find out. Why wouldn't they tell us? Because compared to the money spent on players and managers these days, it'd look like nothing now. So why hasn't it been revealed? Even if it said that they paid him, if they were paying him £5 million a year, it wouldn't be that shocking, would it? And that's probably not far off what they were paying him. Managers aren't paid the same as players, you know. Pep Guardiola, he's probably the highest paid manager in England. And he manages a load of players that are on 10 times the money he's on. But still, he probably got paid a couple of million a year, Dalglish. If that. So if Alan Shearer was getting paid 10 grand a week, and he was the highest paid player in England, then Dalglish should probably have been on about 5 grand a week. If the fee was so high that they haven't revealed it because it's like controversial or shocking. So that suggests that it's very close to the big wages of the best players in the league, which Shearer was. So, yeah, I'm going to guess that it was about half or 3/4 of the money that Shearer was on per week, when you calculate it per week.
Imagine was massive. And of course, we have a slurry of other players that came in for high fees but never exactly made it at Blackburn. All I'm trying to say is that the notion that Blackburn were outspending everyone isn't exactly true. And from the way many former players speak, it seems as though it was only the Shearers and Suttons of the world that were on the mega salaries. Look, I'm not trying to say Blackburn were innocent of enticing through large sums of cash. I'm just saying that the way they've been depicted as the original Chelsea or Man City in the decades since doesn't seem to be a representation of the truth. Plus,
it's
all
not.
of Walker's money came from Walker Steel.
Yeah.
It was locally sourced and traded.
Every penny that Jack Walker spent on this team was made through his family company, family business, Walker Steel, a company that made all its money doing whatever it did with scrap metal, steel. It was a locally sourced budget from a local company. And it was his own money. It was money that he got from selling the company. He sold the family business and then became the owner of Blackburn Rovers. So you cannot compare this to Abramovich at Chelsea or Sheikh Mansour at Man City, because the money that they used to do that, well, there's controversial things, but like Abramovich, he made a lot of money in things that we know about, but there's also rumours that he made a bit of money from a few dodgy things as well. Same with the Newcastle owners. One of them's responsible for owning a company that's breached human rights laws. And I think... I'm pretty sure one of the people involved in the Newcastle takeover, one of the Saudi sheikhs, or members of the people that are in charge of the PIF, the Public Investment Fund in Saudi Arabia, had actual indictments for murdering his political opponents in the year that he was running for some kind of political position in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure I saw a video about that on one of the football channels. I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't this one. It might have been like FNG or the Irish guy. But yeah, but what I'm saying is, all the money that Jack Walker spent on this team was from the money he made selling his company. So I agree with what he's saying, and you can't compare Blackburn spending all the money on players and then winning the league with Chelsea, Abramovich and Chelsea doing the same thing 10 years later. It's just not the same. And Abramovich didn't spend 3.6 million on his best player. He spent like 20 million on his best players. You know, like Ian Robin and Frank Lampard and Didier Drogba, players like that, you know. Yeah, so, no, they don't compare at all.
Yes, Blackburn were, in a sense, new money, but the circumstances had to, at the very least, count for something. Anyway, that's enough of an off-field rant, back to actual football. As I said, Blackburn Rovers had fought their way up to the Premier League and were officially the second best team in the land by 1994. From 19th in the second division to this in only 3 years is unthinkable, and they owed much of it to a winning formula put into place by their legendary manager. In the 94-95 season, this is what we were dealing with. Rovers lined up in a traditional 4-4-2, as one would expect from a Premier League side at the time. Up top were Shearer and Sutton, who were very much the most important.
Do you know what? The 4-4-2 formation is considered old-fashioned these days, but it is very versatile when you edit it. Because I know that this isn't real football, but when it comes to like FIFA manager mode, when you're setting up your team, if you set your team up from a 4-4-2 formation, you really can do a lot of like moving your players about. So if I start from a 4-4-2, I will put I'll put the two forwards I'll put one here and one here, and I'll bring one of the two midfielders from the middle two, not the two wingers, one of the middle two around here to play as like a number 9, sort of central attacking midfielder, but centre forward position. And then I'll move the other midfielder from the middle two a bit further forward as well. It's a very versatile formation, 4-4-2, and I think that's what this is about to show us. So Shearer played a bit further forward than Sutton. Yeah. I'm just making a point that when people say that 4-4-2 is an old-fashioned formation and it shouldn't be used anymore, it's not. It is very versatile. If you edit it in the right way, it can be a very useful formation.
Players on the team. The intention was to involve them in as much of the game as possible. Shearer, in particular, the midfield of Tim Sherwood and Mark Atkins.
I need to start doing FIFA career mode streams again.
Got their heads up whenever possible. The defense of Pearce and Hendry went long whenever they could, and the outside players of Lasso, Berg, Wilcox, and
Yeah, my team doesn't look like this. I mostly start from a 4-3-3. But I don't play with wingers. I don't play with midfield wingers. I play with right and left forwards. I'll have a right and left forward and 2 strikers. So I'm basically playing with a 4 at the back and a 4 at the front. And the rest of sort of scattered around in the middle. So I'll have like a midfielder here and 1 here. So then that means that I've got a forward here. And then a midfielder here. And the fullback will be brought forward as well. So that line is covered. And the same on that side. It works.
Were fed frequently, after which they would aim missiles into the box at
I'll do a stream and I'll show you what I mean. The formation I use works very well.
every opportunity. Sutton was big, physical, and could bring a ball down, play with his back to goal, bring the midfield and wide players up the pitch, and play it off with Shearer. Shearer was highly skilled and had very
That shirt is iconic. The McEwen's Lager A6 Blackburn Rovers shirt is iconic.
few weaknesses
I want one.
this season, if any, which is wild considering that he was coming off an ACL tear from a few seasons ago. He still had his pace, and he could score from virtually any situation.
Oh, nice.
Get tight to him, he shrugs you off. Give him a bit of space, he leaves you in the dust, and the ball almost always ends up.
Do you know, it's Alan Shearer, it's the ultimate, what is it, isn't it? The ultimate, what's the word? Whatever the word is. Greatest goal scorer in Premier League history, but he always did the same celebration for all 260 goals. He just went like that. Hey! He just put his hand up and ran. Most boring celebration ever. Come on, Alan. He could have done a few fucking knee slides at least, or jump up and punch the air. You know what I mean? Just, I mean, he can't have known that he would have gone on to become the best goal scorer in history, but he could have done a few decent celebrations.
In the goal. The 92-93 season was the year that Shearer snapped his ACL. He missed half of Rovers games that year because of it. All the same, he scored 16 goals in the 21 games that he played in. In 93-94, back to full fitness, he scored 31 in
31 goals in 40 appearances. See, this is why Shearer was... Yeah.
40. Many people never come back from ACL injuries, especially 30 years ago. There's a reason he's still considered the greatest.
In those days, barely any players came back from ACL injuries. And if they did, they didn't come back better players than they were before the injury. Not in the early 90s, that just didn't happen.
Pure striker the league has ever seen. I personally only caught...
In fact... Imagine how good Shearer would have been if he didn't end up with that injury.
his later years at Newcastle, and with virtually no knees and no pace, he was still the man. Anyway, that's not to say that this team was a one-trick pony or anything. There was real experience and talent across the pitch. Tim Sherwood, for example, was a real star in the middle. Jack Walker was famously offered the opportunity to sign Zinedine Zidane in 1996 for £1.2 million.
What? Blackburn were offered Zinedine Zidane in 1996 for £1.2 million. Right, what is he about to say the reason why he said no? Why did he say no to that? That's like... Oh, what did I see the other day? Oh, who was it? It was a Premier League club had the opportunity to buy Erling Haaland when he was like 16 for £1 million. I mean, fair enough, he probably wouldn't have stayed there once he became the player that he is now and would have been snapped up because this club is now in the Championship. But yeah, I saw something the other day that an ex-Premier League club had the opportunity to buy Erling Haaland when he was a kid for peanuts. Oh my God, why didn't they buy Zidane though?
Opportunity to sign Zinedine Zidane in 1996 for £1.2 million when he was still at Bordeaux. And you want to know what his response was? Why would I want to buy
Zinedine's... Why would I want to sign Zidane when we have Tim Sherwood? Oh my God! That's as true now as it was back then in terms of management as well, isn't it? I mean, as true if someone had said that in terms of when Tottenham brought Tim Sherwood in as manager a few years ago, and they could have got Zidane as manager, and it turned out that the owner said, why would I want Zidane when we can get Tim Sherwood? It'd be as ridiculous in those terms as it was when they were players. Oh, that is mental. Jack Walker actually said that. He said, why would I want Zidane when we have Tim Sherwood? Oh, I'm glad they won a Premier League, but that is a mistake. That is a huge mistake.
when he was still at Bordeaux. And you want to know what his response was? Why would I want to buy Zidane when we have Tim Sherwood? Newcastle also turned down the opportunity to sign him for the same fee, citing that he was not good enough for English football. He went to Juventus that same year and won the Ballon d'Or 2 years.
And he went to Juventus and won the Ballon d'Or 2 years later. Oh my gosh. That is crazy. Again, that's another thing I love about videos like this. When you hear about the players certain clubs could have bought, and not just could have bought because they were cheap or young and unknown, but literally had like scouts tracking them and reported back that these players were available for like £1 million, and still they turned them down, and then they went to a different club and won the Champions League or became the top scorer or won the Ballon d'Or. You know, it's mental.
Years later. No comment. But all joking aside, what their quote tells us is that he had confidence in his players. And why wouldn't he? Atkins and Sherwood were dogs. They would hound the opposition and wouldn't stop until possession was retained. As I said, Shearer was such a threat in large part due to his versatility. He would drop into the midfield to create 3 in the middle, but would usually take 1 or 2 defenders with him. Ripley, Sutton, and Wilcox knew exactly what to do.
See, I don't like to do that with my strikers. I always, so in your manager mode, you can give instructions to every player on the pitch, and with my strikers, I always tell them to stay forward, because you can set the option to have them drop back into midfield or come back on defence, full on back all the way back to the defensive line if needed. But I don't do that. I tell my 2 central strikers to always stay forward at all times to conserve energy. But that's interesting how Shearer would drop back into midfield if needed. and Wilcox and Ripley would...
one or two defenders with him. Ripley, Sutton, and Wilcox knew exactly what to do next. Lasso was great at driving into the midfield too. This team knew how to progress the ball. Blackburn were very much expected to challenge for the title in 1994. Anything but would spell embarrassment on the part of Jack Walker, Dalglish, and all the millions that had been spent. However, they needed to be more than just good if they wanted to pose a threat to the great
Kings of the
Manchester United.
90s.
United were relentless at this point. They were the only club to have won the Premier League up to then after winning 2 in a row. Giggs, Keane, Cole, Cantona, Dennis Irwin.
Giggs, Keane, Cole, Cantona, Dennis Irwin. You know, you just hear names like that and then you remember that they were all at the same club, in the same team, and you just think it's no wonder they were so successful. It's wow.
Dennis Irwin was, my God, Dennis. Imagine if Dennis was playing now.
Well,
And always
Dennis Irwin was a god. He was a fucking god. Cantona. Do you know what? I'm a bit funny with Cantona. When I look at his records, his goal scoring records, I think he was a bit overrated, personally. You can hate me for that in the comments, and I'm sure that I'll get hate for it, but I think Cantona was a bit overrated. Compared to the standards that the best strikers in the Premier League put in now, compared to Cantona, these days, a player with his record wouldn't be considered a king like he was. I understand why the fans loved him, but at the end of the day, a striker's job is to score goals to help the team progress. He scored a lot of goals, but not a ridiculous amount of goals. I don't know, I just personally think he was just a little bit overrated. If you look at his record, and look at it from a point of view of players like Harry Kane, Haaland, Aguero, going a bit further back, Drogba, Rooney, players like that, you know, you'll see what I mean. He wasn't anywhere close to those kind of numbers.
Dennis Irwin was, my God, Dennis. Imagine if Dennis was playing now. And always fit.
This team was the real deal, and they were very well drilled. Blackburn were going to have to come up with something special here. They didn't start off perfectly, as Southampton held them to a 1-1 draw. Arsenal held them at Highbury too. In fact, they only managed 6 wins in their first 11 games. The 11th defeat was at the hands of Manchester United, 4-2 at Ewood Park. Rovers led this game twice, but couldn't hold on to their leads. To be fair, in this game, Henning Berg was sent off for fouling Lee Sharp before Eric Cantona made it 1-1. Not only was this an incorrect call as Berg got the ball, but he was sent off, compounding Rovers' misery. They were doomed in that game from that moment on, but after that, they went through the period that would ultimately prove pivotal in the race. 12 games in a row, unbeaten. Only one...
Wow. 11 wins in 12 games. From 29th of October to the 14th of January. Yeah, that's when the league titles won. Between the end of October and the start of February. If you can put together a run of winning at least 10 to 12 of the 15, 16 games you'll play in that period, you win in the league. Or not far off. You're going to finish in the top 5 at least, if you can put together a run in that period of 10, 11, 12, 13 wins, or 14 or 15, if you can do it. But yeah.
Draw in that time frame, keeping them at the top. Saying Shearer was on fire in this season would be a monumental understatement. With 34 goals in 42 games, he equaled the all-time record for most goals scored in a single Premier League season. With 47 goals and assists, he contributed to 59% of Blackburn Rovers' goals that season.
59% of the goals scored, Shearer contributed to 34 goals and 13 assists. Wow.
I drew attention to Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton earlier for a reason, because combined, they scored 49 goals this season.
49 goals between
61%
them.
of all goals scored by the club in the league. They were animals. The 12-game unbeaten streak was brought to a close by none other than Manchester United. 1-0, courtesy of Eric Cantona. Now, little did we all know that Cantona would take points away from Blackburn on that day, but he would also go on to virtually give them the league about 3 days later.
Yeah.
All I'm saying,
Absolute dickhead. You know, it is like rule one of being a professional footballer is that you ignore what the crowd says. I mean, I've been at the amount of football matches that I've been to where the opposing team's goalkeeper has been 5 feet away from us and we're shouting things at him and they don't even flinch. He was an idiot. Yeah. Mind you, I remember once one goalkeeper actually turned round, acknowledged us, and just laughed. he literally laughed. And he got a cheer from us. Everybody cheered at him because they were like, fair enough, lad. You know, we're basically 50, 60 people here calling you a wanker, calling you a fat bastard, calling you this, calling you that, and you've just turned around and laughed along with it. So we gave him his due. You know, it takes balls to do that. Good sport, good, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, that Cantona reaction to the bloke in the crowd, I don't care what he said. That was just ridiculous.
is that you don't want to be sitting
Wasn't it a similar thing with Zidane? Why he headbutted the guy in the World Cup final? Said something similar. Pretty sure it was.
pitch side at Selhurst Park when Eric Cantona comes to town. The famous karate kick. After getting sent off for a foul against Crystal Palace, as he was walking off the pitch, he started receiving abuse by the home support. One man in particular is said to have stated that Cantona should f*** off back to France.
Is that official? Is that what the guy said? He should F off back to France? Right. Yeah, because that's worth kicking someone in the face and ruining your fucking career and reputation for the best part of 8 months, isn't it?
Cantona literally said, say less, launched a flying kick and followed it up with a devastating punch combo. He was banned for 8 months from all football activity in all leagues, meaning leaving England wouldn't help. Plus, he was fined £30,000 all in all. He was Manchester United's talisman at the time, their driving force, and undoubtedly had the biggest presence amongst all men on the pitch whenever he was on it. His loss put a monumental dent in United's title charge. Over 2 decades later, in 2021, when promoting his short film, The United Way, he simply said, "I have one regret. I would have loved to kick him even harder."
You see, this is one of the reasons... he thinks he's some kind of... He thinks that he was like a renaissance man of football. When you see him in a documentary talking about football, he talks about it like he's a professional art scholar talking about Michelangelo masterpiece. You know, he's such a pretentious twat. I just can't stand him. But I have one regret. He was asked if he had any regrets from his career, and he said, "I have one regret. I would have loved to have kicked him even harder." Yeah, and then you'd have got even longer a ban. Oh, what a twat.
Fair enough. United's season certainly began losing gas from then on. They were losing matches that were there to be won and drawing matches that could have gone their way. Now, here's the thing. If you're expecting me to say that Blackburn were doing any better, I can't, because it wouldn't be true. They were also dropping points that they had no business dropping if they had real title aspirations. However, as I said, their early form was carrying them through. In the 5 games leading up to the final game of the season, Blackburn had won 2 games overall, with 2 losses and a draw. United, on the other hand, woke up late and went undefeated with 5 wins in the 7 leading up to the final game. It really goes to show that every single game in the 7
Hughes, Sharp, Cole. Look at that. Cole got 2 hat-tricks in these 2 games. He was a great player, Andy Cole. He really was.
Leading up to the final game. It really goes to show that every single game in the league matters. And we come to the final day. Blackburn on 89 points, Manchester United on 87. It was all set up for a nervy
Getting
finish.
flashbacks to the
United were
2011-12
away at
season.
West Ham and Blackburn were away at Anfield. Both of these games were a must-win for both teams, with fans at each stadium glued to not only the games in front of them, but getting constant radio updates from across the country.
Radio
And
updates.
I gotta tell you, man, life works in funny ways because neither team won. In fact, Blackburn lost. And even though Alan Shearer
Blackburn
opened
lost.
the scoring on the final day, John Barnes equalised and Jamie Redknapp broke Rovers' hearts with a belter of a free kick in the 90th minute.
Jamie Redknapp. I've met him. Nice fella.
2-1 Liverpool. And this moment right here at Anfield, it may be one of the most confusing atmospheres.
You know, it's one of my favourite stadiums in England, that Anfield. You won't think it was as big as it is from the outside. Because you look at a stadium of a similar capacity, like St James's Park, and you can tell that it's that big because St James's Park has those 2 stands that are fucking huge. But Anfield doesn't look that big, but it is. In fact, it's bigger. I think it's just such a lovely design with the red brick facade here and this. You know, I love Anfield as a stadium. I think it's like a really nice mix of modern and classic stadium design. I hope they don't knock it down and move to a modern stadium, you know. I hope they stick with this for at least another couple of decades because it really is a beautiful stadium.
In Premier League history. The Liverpool
Well, they don't need a bigger stadium, you know. They can get 60,000 people in it, or not far off. That's more than enough.
players were celebrating their winner on the pitch, while the Blackburn fans were crying tears of joy in the stands. Every single person in that stadium was overjoyed and had a reason to smile. United had drawn to West Ham, and Kenny Dalglish won the Premier League title at Anfield. It's quite the story, you know?
Kenny Dalglish won the Premier League title for Blackburn at Anfield. Well, there you go. How about that for irony, eh? Oh, here we are. 61,276. Yeah, they don't need a new stadium then, do they? That is more than enough. So that makes it the second largest stadium in the Premier League. You've got Tottenham Hotspur, which is 60,000 bang on. Anfield at 61,276. And Old Trafford at 74,000, whatever it is. So, yeah.
The 1994-95 Premier League season was a game of slim margins, but none of that mattered because at the end of the day, Blackburn Rovers were champions. Blackburn Rovers, the team that Jack built, the team that King Kenny led. Blackburn Rovers, only the second team to win the English Premier League.
That is such a dream, you know. The fact that he was a fan of the club and it was the club that he went to watch from his childhood up until he bought the club, and then he became the owner of that club, invested the money that he invested, and made them the champions of the football division that would go on to become the biggest that is amazing.
For the first time in 81 years, Rovers had climbed back to the summit of English football.
81 years. First time they'd won the First Division title for 81 years. Wow.
They never showed the ambition that got them there ever again.
They didn't.
It seemed as though there was no real plan to make sure that there was a smooth success.
They probably could have done. You know, Blackburn, because the Premier League didn't go money crazy for a few more years after that. So Jack Walker, if he was worth 600 million, he probably could have kept Blackburn challenging for titles for a few more seasons. without spending too much money. So let's say that if he spent about 70 million of his 600 million to make them Premier League champions, he probably could have kept them in the top 4 for the next 2-3 seasons by spending just another 30 million quid, as long as he kept the rest of the squad.
Right off the bat, Kenny Dalglish decided that he was done with management for the club and opted to take a position as the director of football. While Dalglish was off playing golf, Ray Harford, his assistant manager who had replaced him, failed to replicate his success. Rovers fell to 7th place. It was also at this point that a mass exodus began to occur. In the next 3 years, they lost Shearer, Lasso, Pearce, Berg.
Lasso... Is that when Lasso went to Chelsea, or did he go somewhere else?
Sherwood, Hendry, and many more. Without the correct leadership and without the correct recruitment, Rovers were unable to keep up with the increasing competition of top-flight English football. Jack Walker wasn't a fan of failure, so the club began playing a game of manager roulette. Between 1991 and 1995, it was just Kenny Dalglish. Between 1995 and 2000, it was Ray Harford, Roy Hodgson, Tony Parks, Brian Kidd, and Graham
Wow, they couldn't make it work even with Roy Hodgson or Graham Souness. That's interesting. Because, you know, Souness was still a decent manager in the 90s, and so was Hodgson.
They were champions in 1995. They were relegated in 1999.
Fucking hell, that is crazy. Champions in 1995, relegated in 1999. How long did it take Leicester to get relegated after they won it in 2015, 2016? It didn't take them much longer. It wasn't that much longer that they went down. Is it 2022? Can't remember. But yeah. Wow, it only took them 4 years to get relegated after they won the Premier League. That is mental. And do you know what? This season, Leicester are in danger of doing the same thing as Blackburn. They could end up in League One this season. They're not that far above the relegation zone themselves. Leicester.
Extremely swift fall from grace.
When Leicester City got relegated, I really did think they would bounce straight back up. I honestly did. And they haven't come close. I thought they'd come back up and go back to being maybe a mid-table side, and then they'd start steadying the ship again, and then start climbing again. I thought that was going to be, from the league title onwards, I thought it was going to be the start of a new era for Leicester. But, yeah, when they...
Whatever the plan was, this was certainly not the intended result. And, sadly, just 1 year later, terrible news. After a fight with cancer, Jack Walker had passed on at the age of 71. The club wasn't in the greatest of places. There was a resurgence in the following year, though.
Oh, that's shit, man. The guy that made all this happen died. Seriously. Fuck you, cancer. Go fuck yourself.
The club wasn't in the greatest of places. There was a resurgence in the following year, though. Promotion back to the Premier League and a League Cup win in 2002. Blackburn was slowly building their way back into prominence and established themselves as mid-table in the league for the next 11 years, which I would say is a huge win. This was historically their level before the Walker era in the First Division. And the fact that they were able to do this as the more traditionally successful clubs and Chelsea were spending more and more says a lot more about the fight that this team has. It should also be noted that in Walker's final hours, he put in place mechanisms that would ensure that Rovers remained competitive for the foreseeable future. A number of years ago, I put in place a family trust structure to own my various business interests, including Blackburn Rovers. This structure ensures continuity of management and provides the necessary financial support for all my businesses for the foreseeable future. In the years that followed, the Walker Family Trust put about £3 million into the club per year. And by 2005, Walker had been responsible for putting roughly £100 million of his own money into the club, interest-free.
Wow.
Even in death, he looked after this club more.
So even after he passed away, he was still putting money into Blackburn Rovers. What a fucking hero, man. You see, people like this, you don't. These are the football stories that you don't hear, because it happens to be a club that isn't successful anymore. I mean, as I said earlier in the video, they're struggling to survive in the Championship. They're not Man City or Arsenal, so you won't hear that. And it happened a long time ago. Do you know, when I see stories like this, I just pray that one day somebody from Bradford who has been going to watch Bradford City since he was like 4 years old will become a fucking business genius, become a billionaire, and then come back, buy us, and win us a fucking Premier League. Where's our Jack Walker? We want a Jack Walker. But there's nobody, you know? There's nobody. I don't think there's anybody from Bradford that's worth more than £100 million. I mean, no, I don't think. Our current owner is a German guy who's worth about £160 million. Now, if he was 100% committed and he just turned around one day and said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever I can, that'd get us in the Championship easily. And we probably could make a push for the Premier League. But he's not going to do that because he's a businessman. He has a company. But yeah, we need a Jack Walker. But I don't think it's going to happen because what is the biggest company in Bradford? I mean, our club our main sponsor is a car dealership from Bradford. It's quite big, but in terms of like the national level, it's not. It's big to the city of Bradford, but on a national, it's not. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to end up with somebody like Jack Walker. I mean, well, Morrison's is a Yorkshire business with the headquarters in Bradford, but I don't think the current owner of Morrison's is a Bradford fan. My granddad used to tell me about the Morrison's family, and I'm pretty sure they're not Bradford fans. So he's not going to buy the club. So yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
Than 99.9%
we'll
of
see.
owners ever could while they breathe. However, by 2007, everything changed. The trust seized their donations, the reasoning being that they believed the new influx of Premier League TV revenue would more than cover any investments they had to make to keep the club afloat. It was also made public that Rovers were in the market for investors to help the club move forward in the post-Walker era. This search led them to the Venkateshwara Hatcheries Group, or just Venky's, owners of an Indian poultry and pharmaceutical multinational conglomerate. For £43 million, the club was theirs in November of 2010. The higher-ups of the club...
The Venky's bought Blackburn Rovers, a Premier League club, for £43 million. When this German lot bought us, they paid over £6 million for us, and we were in League Two. That is ridiculous. We're a Premier League club. There's not a single club in the Premier League now that's worth less than £100 million. Not one.
were likely hoping to land a passionate fan of football that was focused on nothing but success.
Tottenham are in with a very real chance of being relegated this season, and they're worth about 3 billion.
For Blackburn, and at times it has seemed as though they have the club's best interest.
I think in the financial year 2024-2025, Tottenham Hotspur were the sixth highest, that had the sixth highest profit margin in world football out of every club in the world. So that's including your Real Madrid, your PSG, your Man City, your Juventus, your Bayern Munich, Club America. Name any club you want. Tottenham were in the top. I think they were the sixth highest grossing club, highest earning club in the world in the financial year 24-25.
At heart. They have put money into the club, and the football has been free-flowing at times, but there is a lack of fan engagement and overall care on their part. They seem to run the club from India and have kept the fans in the dark over several years. Almost immediately upon their takeover,
Dirty
Blackburn
bastards.
were relegated to the Championship and then again to League One in 2017. They came back up in 2018, but they have remained in the
League One.
Championship ever since. As you can tell, I skipped over a lot of detail because the decline
I can remember us, our lot playing against them. Yeah.
of Blackburn Rovers is a very, very complicated affair. One that has several twists and turns, and one that certainly can't be explained in a single video. Plus, this video is already the longest video I've ever made. Having said that, I think we still have time for just one more chapter.
Legend. Is this
The
going to be
major
about Jack?
consensus here is that the blame for Blackburn's fortunes post-95 are sat on the shoulders of A, the Walker Trust, and B, the Venky's. The
Venky's.
legacy of the man in the centre.
That man did something with that club that hadn't been done in over 8 decades. So, no blame should ever be put at the door of that man. He is a legend. He spent a fortune on making the club that he loved, supported and loved all his life. Money that he was more than entitled to jet off to a tropical paradise and retire in peace with. Money that he'd made selling his family business, but he chose to invest it in the club he loved and spent a fortune on the best players that he could find, Kenny Dalglish as manager, and made them Premier League champions. So it's not his fault. It's those dirty fucking Venky's. And that's another thing that I've heard as well. The thing that he mentioned about them not even bothering to come over to England and do their job as owners. They do everything from India. They're barely ever seen in Blackburn or at the stadium. I've seen so many Blackburn fans say that on Facebook, that the amount of fans I've seen that have said, Blackburn fans I've seen that have said, I've never even met the owners, I've never been to a game, and I've never seen them at a game, and I'm a season ticket holder. I have been for the last 10 years, and I've never seen them there. I've been a season ticket holder for 20 years, never seen them at a game. Things like that, Yeah, so no, it's not Jack Walker's fault, it's the Venky's.
Remains intact. There were seemingly two sides to Jack Walker. The side that Blackburn supporters and those who love a good story saw, and the side that many onlookers disgusted by the growing influx of money into the sports saw. There's an article by The Independent that I came across that profiled Jack Walker. Written in 1992, it came out as the country was beginning to take notice at what he was doing in that small town up north. His aim is to buy success for Blackburn Rovers no matter the cost to himself, and his critics say to the future of an industry that can ill afford to let him send transfer fees through the roof. If he succeeds and Rovers eventually start to win trophies, he will not be found riding open-top buses or appearing in team pictures. Jack Walker opens his wallet more often than his heart.
The Independent. What more needs to be said? The Independent is one of the most... I hate them.
It tells you all you need to know about public sentiment. I couldn't find any team open-air bus photos, but he certainly appeared in his fair share of team photos. Plus,
Opens his wallet more than he opens his heart. What, so you don't call him spending an absolute fucking fortune on giving Blackburn Rovers fans some of the greatest memories, most of which will still be alive today? They'll remember that. It's 1995. It's not that long ago. I was born a year later. So the people that will remember that will be in their 40s or 50s or 60s. And it'll be it'll probably be for the people that lived to see that didn't get married and had a family. That'll be their happiest memory, seeing their team win the Premier League. You know? So, and he gave them that. So I'd call that him opening his heart for the Blackburn fans to have something that they can be proud of and remember. Because that means whatever happens to Blackburn Rovers, whether they get relegated from the Championship or whatever, they can say, we won the Premier League title. I mean, as a Bradford City, so many Bradford City fans, including myself, when clubs like Accrington Stanley and fucking, all these shitty little clubs like Barrow and Harrogate Town take the piss out of us when they beat us, we say, can you say that you've been in the Premier League in the in the current century? No, you can't, because you've never even been in the First Division. We only say that to teams that have never been in the First Division, obviously. But yeah, so if I can say that, if we say that as a team that have only been in the Premier League, Blackburn can say we won the Premier League. He gave them that. So that article criticising him as someone that just spent money, no, that's wrong.
air bus photos, but he certainly appeared in his fair share of team photos. Plus, as I noted earlier, the fees he was paying, apart from 2 players, were largely in line with the going rate that other clubs were paying. This is a man that went out and built a wildly successful life through what I can imagine was nothing but grit. He dedicated £100 million that we know of to his boyhood club and asked for nothing in return.
£100 million is all he spent at Blackburn. So he still had, and he was worth 600 million when he took over. Right, okay.
Single person watching this video wishes they could do something similar. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late, the man who wins is the fellow who thinks he can. This quote was hung upon the wall in Walker's office in Jersey. I'd wager that this is a fair insight to his true mentality. If you take a quick glance at the Blackburn Rovers badge, among the bright colors and the red rose, you'll see a Latin phrase that reads arte et labore. This directly translates to by skill and by labor. And this is because Blackburn is, at its core, an industrial town. Cotton textiles, steel, and more. Skill and labor, the pillars that built this town into what it is. Jack Walker was the embodiment of that, an entrepreneurial spirit and undoubtedly the biggest and most influential legend in the history of Blackburn Rovers. None of what I've spoken about in this video would have been possible without this man. And with that, I leave you with yet another quote. This one is by Jack Straw, the Home Secretary and Blackburn's Labour MP. Jack Walker did more than any other individual in the last century to enhance the self-confidence and the prosperity of his hometown. He was completely committed to the town and its people.
Yep.
And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about.
I don't often agree with Labour MPs, but yeah, that's true. That is what he did.
Blackburn. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.
Wow. Right, that's the end of the video. Well, I really enjoyed that. What a hero Jack Walker was. And again, very informative. Yeah, it's just a story that I've always wanted to see and hear about. Blackburn Rovers, how they won the Premier League, and yep, how they did it. And as it turns out, so what that video, what I'm going to take from that video is that it was basically the first instance of what is considered the main thing that you need to win the Premier League these days. You need somebody with a shitload of cash to come in and buy your club, spend a lot of cash to buy the best players, and then you're in with a chance. Because that's how Man City did it, that's how Chelsea did it, that's how Man City are currently doing it, that's how Newcastle are going to do it, because whether you like it or not, Newcastle United are going to go on to become the most successful club in England within the next decade or so. They're owned by the richest public fund in the world. The Saudi thing that owns Man City versus the Saudi thing that owns Newcastle. The one that owns Newcastle is richer than the one that owns Man City. So you look at what the Man City owners have managed to do in the last 10, 15 years. So just imagine what the people that own Newcastle are going to do. But yeah, he was like the first of those kind of people that bought a Premier League club or became the owners of a Premier League club and then spent the money and turned them into winners. That's what I'm taking from that. But he didn't do it in the same way they did. You know, I mean, the amount of players that he only spent like £500,000 on, or 400 grand, 40 grand, he spent 40 grand on one of the players. Yeah, I love that. And he didn't do it because he wanted to make money out of the club, or because he wanted to become a famous face in football. He did it because he was a Blackburn Rovers fan, and had been all his life. He'd been a successful businessman, and then he sold his family business and realised, hold on, I'm worth over £500 million. I'm gonna buy me hometown club and turn them into winners. I'm trying to do a Lancashire accent. I'm trying to sound like Peter Kay. I'm gonna buy my hometown club, I am, and turn them into the best team in the world. Watch me do this. But that's basically what he did. He bought Blackburn, and he made them Premier League champions, and made those fans' dreams come true. And the 2 seasons before he did it, they finished, what, 4th and 2nd? 8 points behind Man United, who won the league. So he came close to winning it twice. Never mind once. He nearly won it twice. So yeah, I think Jack Walker, after watching that, Jack Walker is certainly going to go down as one of the greatest club owners in history. Even if it was only one Premier League title that he won. But it's not just because of that, it's because after he died, he literally wrote it into his will, or whatever it is that you write into to set something up like that. That, from his fortune that he left after he passed away, he set that thing up that gave Blackburn Rovers £3 million every year. And it must have rose with inflation. Because, did it say that he died in 1999? I think the Venkies took over in 2011, and it said that before they took over, and before the trust was liquidated, before the trust was stopped, it had given £100 million to the club, so it must have been rising with inflation. It must have gone up from more than £3 million a year, because it said that by the time the trust was stopped, his trust that he set up had given £100 million to the club. But yeah, that's like 50% of the reason why he's one of the best owners of any club. Because even in death, he set up a trust to make sure that his club would be alright and that they'd keep going. And I love that. I absolutely love that. You know? He turned them into Premier League champions. And then he got cancer. He knew that he was going to die, but he still set up a trust. He thought of his club first and set something up that would take money out of his fortune after he passed away, that would make sure they'd be alright. That is such an amazing gesture. And yeah, I think that's an incredible story. That's one of the best football stories I've ever heard. And I'm surprised I've never heard the story before. And I just hope for the best now for Blackburn in the future. I hope that they can turn it around. I hope they can get rid of these terrible owners and find a new, either a new owner or a new syndicate or conglomerate or whatever you want to call it, that can come in, take over, get them back in the Premier League. And even if it's just like it was throughout the 2000s, where they finish mid-table, so what? You're in the Premier League playing Premier League football. That's good enough. You know, if you can get promoted to the Premier League and then finish between 16th and 10th for 3, 4, 5 years, the money that you can earn from that, if you don't go too crazy with the transfer spend, you can build that up, save that up, and then use it to go further. That's how Bournemouth have done it, you know? Because they've only got a tiny stadium. Their stadium only holds 10,000, but they are building a new one. Well, they're going to expand the current one. They're not building a new one. They're going to expand the current stadium. They're going to fill in the corners and put a second tier on one of the stands, and it's going to go up to about 18,000 or 20,000. So it'll still be smaller than Bradford Stadium, but it'll be more. But the way they've done it is they've settled with finishing mid-table, but you still get about 8 million quid, about 60, 70 million pounds prize money for finishing 10th, 11th, 12th in the Premier League. And they've saved that up, and they've kept bringing in good players with that money that they've saved up, and stayed in the Premier League for a lot longer than anybody thought they would. So, if Blackburn can do that, then, yeah. So, I hope to see Blackburn recover very soon and get themselves back into the top division, because, frankly, their fans deserve it. But that was a great video. So, all that's left to say is a massive shout out to Football Iconic and the man behind the channel for giving me permission to use his video for a reaction video. I really enjoyed that documentary. It was really entertaining, really interesting, really endearing story to hear, actually. Because I've always wondered how Blackburn did it, you know, and I always knew that Shearer was there when it happened, and he did a madness in that season, that he scored a shitload of goals and got a load of assists, and that Dalglish was the manager, but that was about it. I didn't know much more beyond that, and I didn't know that the bloke who made all that possible was a local guy with a business that he sold and then invested £100 million into the club. And yeah, so that's what I've got from this video. I've learned a lot. And it's just made that story even more even more special now. And yeah, I'm sure there's other documentaries about it, but this is the most informative one that I've seen about the Blackburn Premier League champion story. So there you go. So all I'm going to say now is everybody that's watching this video, make sure that you go over to this channel, Football Iconic. I will link the channel in the description. And that you go over to his channel and subscribe, because his videos are incredible. They're just brilliant. It doesn't matter what club you support. From a neutral perspective, there is something for everybody on this channel. So many great documentaries about so many great eras and teams. So go check out the channel. So much great content to find on Football Iconic. And I hope you enjoyed this video. It's just a bonus video, this, really, but it's something that, as I said, I was planning to do a while ago, and I thought that I'd get it done today. So there you go. So thanks everybody for watching, and I might do another one of these in the future, depending on how people respond to this. If you like this, let me know. If you'd like to see more reactions like this to football iconic stories about other clubs and football eras, let me know, and I'll do more of these, because I enjoyed this, actually. So yeah, let me know. Like and subscribe, and check out the Patreon for exclusive content and unedited versions of every reaction video to a TV show or movie. They're all available on Patreon as well, and membership starts from just $1 a month, which is about 80p. So go over there and check that out. But that's it from me. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Goodbye.